Michael J. Rhodes. Thank you for taking the time to come on a second time on Your Superior Self. How are you, my friend?
My pleasure, and I'm very, very well. I'm always well. It's the best way to be.
Absolutely. So before we started recording, before I hit record, we had a couple of topics I wanted to hit upon, and then immediately you talked about metaphysical traveling, and I am very curious about that. So you said that it is different than out-of-body experience. So can you enlighten me on the two different distinctions?
Sure. The Monroe Institute, they teach out-of-body experience, as you probably know, Robert Monroe's.
Mm-hmm.
And out-of-body experience means body asleep. And then when your body goes to sleep, your consciousness, instead of staying locked in your sleeping state and accessing life through dreams, your consciousness goes with your astral body. So we all have a physical body, and then in the same space, but considerably larger, there's a mental body, an emotional body, an etheric body, and an astral body. They're just some of them. So we are actually made up of many bodies. When you look in the mirror, you only see one, and everybody tends to think that's who they are. That is the least of who we are, that physical body. And so there is a technique you can learn to allow your consciousness to move out with the astral. And if you didn't travel every night with your astral body, in the Second World War, when they did brainwashing, the technique was to not allow them to leave their physical body, to not allow the astral to go. And then the brain goes into deep sort of fatigue, and you can begin to make it more malleable and brainwash, as they called it. And so it's a natural thing that your astral body has to leave the physical body. And in fact, the astral body tends to draw through the nervous system of the body for energy. So when you're sleeping and the astral's gone, your glandular system, to a degree, does a bit of repair work. I mean, I'm putting it rather baldly, but that's the sort of thing that's going on an energetic level. Now, it occurred to me a long, long time ago, if you can let your consciousness go with your astral when you're asleep, then what is it to stop you doing that when your body's awake? It's the criteria your body has to be asleep. And I think since then, there are other names, what I call it, because the Russians certainly perfected what they call far seeing. And so where the person is sitting wide awake, but they're looking, say, from Russia, but they've learned to be in America, looking at the nuclear stockpiles and things like that. So that's called far seeing. And now they don't use it as a weapon, but they certainly use it to spy on other countries. And the Russians have been doing that quite a long time. I have no doubt they're doing it now in America. In fact, I know they are. And so, but when I did it, I had a much more innocent idea of this. And so I taught myself to relax and then begin to imagine. And we will talk about imagination because that's the key. And so I began to imagine myself moving away from my physical body. And I did this at school time when I should have been listening to the teacher because they bored me. And in those days, I didn't know that I was a very right-brain child in a very left-brain dominant school. And so the school was all intellectual, left brain and intellect. And in fact, although I didn't know it, I was far more into right brain and intelligence. But there wasn't much intelligence in the school. It was just academic, intellectual stuff, which didn't interest me. So I started trying to imagine the teacher shrinking. And gradually I achieved this for myself with my imagination. And as they shrunk, the voice shrunk. So that was good because it's it didn't distract me. I got quite a shock. I was very young when I realized everybody else could see the teacher, however small they were. And then I gradually realized, well, I'm the only one who's seeing this. I'm the only one who's doing it. So that became a bit fascinating. So I decided then, well, maybe if I could shrink the teacher, then I could take myself outside. And so I began to imagine myself outside. And one day I was down in the school playground in my imagination, and I saw a half bottle of milk under a shrub. And I thought, that's interesting. Anyway, obviously, when I came back at playtime, I went and looked under the shrub, and quite a shock to see a half bottle of curdled milk under there. And I thought, oh my God, and this stuff is real. I tried to tell my dad, he just batted me off. Whatever nonsense are you talking about? And so I realized that this wasn't for adults. And I kept on developing it. And then I found girls and forgot all about it. They were far more fascinating. But then I got into my late 20s, and I was married at 21. And I began to think about this. And so I began to slowly develop it to the point that I could, which I do now, I can sit down in my study and relax, and I close my eyes, but I can do it now, my eyes open, and I allow what I call my light body. That's my term for it. I allow that body to move away from the physical body, but I let about 90% go, and I retain about 10%. And that 10%, gradually I learned I could then keep going on the typewriter, now on the computer, and I could write down what I was experiencing on a different level. And gradually over the time, I fine-tuned that. And some people say I imagine it all, it's not real, and I don't mind what they think. Mm-hmm. I know my reality, and what other people think is completely irrelevant to me.
Sure.
And so I've written several books from that point, like Through the Eyes of Love. All those are books of my Through the Eyes of Love, book 1, 2, and 3, and Stepping Between Realities. They are all books which are basically describing my metaphysical travels.
Mm-hmm. So the imagination part, I know it takes some awareness, right? Like when I imagine myself on a beach, or I imagine myself wherever, I tend to I can get in that moment and imagine myself at the beach, and I can hear the waves, I can feel the sand, I can smell the salt air, but then it's then maybe 2 or 3 seconds go by, and then my mind is kind of spotty. It goes somewhere else, and then I have to pull myself back to that beach. And it's my imagination. Now, listening to what you're saying, is your vision or your what you're seeing, is it like present day reality, like this right now where I see you, or is when you're traveling metaphysically, is it kind of different? Does it look holographic? Does it look 3D? What is that? I mean, or
it does look very different, yes. I mean, when you're in the physical body, you have a 2-eye focus. When you're out of the physical body, let's just put it this way, you're what I call the light body. Let's take one more step back. Who are you? And so the truth is, who you are is a magnificent metaphysical. You're more than physical, multidimensional. So the only part of you that is 3-dimensional is your physical body, but you're not a physical body. So in truth, in a deeper truth, none of us are 3-dimensional beings. Now, so if you're multidimensional, what's the other dimension? Now, one thing you can't show me is your inspiration, your emotions, your mental, your thoughts. You can't show them. You can't show me your imagination or your intuition or any of those things. They're all metaphysical. They're all on a 4th-dimensional level. And so your body's 3-dimensional, which isn't you, and everything that is you is on a 4th-dimensional level. And now, as your body, as we so-called age, which I completely refute, that's why I say so-called, as we so-called age, your body, you tend to think older. I'm getting older, like I'm 85 in a couple of months. And anybody who knows me doesn't mention you're getting older, because They just say, oh, you're not normal, you're in a different category. But the point is, I see myself as just tweaking the other side of middle age. And so I've got a lot of life ahead of me. And but as a regular, normal person, their body begins, the resonance of their body begins to slow down a fraction. Now, in our metaphysical body, we have chakras, and they are spinning wheels of energy. And so as our physical body loses energy, in a way, it loses cohesion. And so it doesn't connect so well with our metaphysical body, because we're metaphysical beings. We're magnificent, metaphysical, multidimensional, immortal, eternal beings of love, the power of creation, and light, the illumination of eternity. That's who we are. Now, that's pretty well something. You can't dismiss that. When you criticize yourself, you're criticizing that. So we have, basically today, humanity has no clue as to who they are or why they are, what their purpose is or anything. I mean, certainly there are people like you and many individuals who definitely have a clue, but the mass, they don't have a faintest idea. This is why we've got this crisis we're going through. This is breaking the old template. We've got to break the template because we become so subconscious, we're stagnating. Humanity is stagnating. So it's time to start afresh. And it's doing a good job. I'm all for this. Bring it on. Let's do it. And so, and come out the other side. And so it's also the Great Awakening, but it's also the Great Divide. It's going to be two types of people at the end of all this. Anyway, back to imagination. And so when I, for instance, teach people how to take a journey, then I basically get them to go through those chakras, starting at the base chakra, moving through the chakras to the 12th chakra. And then I suggest that they start to consciously imagine. So most people are subconsciously imagining all day. And but all that creates is more of the same, because we've got the old program, more of the same. Repeat, repeat. And so when you're imagining, we've got to realize not another creature on this planet has imagination, only us. Now, nature is a natural evolution of consciousness, but humanity is the creative evolution of consciousness. So imagine that nature follows its own biological blueprint and grows within that in consciousness. We create our own blueprint, and we're creating it every moment. So in every moment of your life, you are creating the content and direction of every moment of your life. And so if you therefore use conscious imagination, you're now switched on to your highest level of creation. In other words, we create our lives. Every single one of us, every person who's got COVID, everyone has created it for themselves. You only have to fear it, and you're like a magnet, you're pulling it in. You're lowering your consciousness down to be a perfect fit with COVID. Whereas if you just dismiss it, knowing, not hoping, but knowing that you have a resonance beyond COVID and there's nothing to fear, then you're completely immune to it because you don't resonate on the same level. It can't get you. It's never on that level. And so with imagination, you consciously create what you want. So when I travel, I consciously imagine this light being, this metaphysical body, leaving my physical body. So when I'm out there, I now have a sense of perception that is incredible compared to when you're in the body. Your body closes it down. You've got to remember, of all the many bodies we have, the slowest by far is the physical body. It's really quite dense. It really is quite dense. And when you're in your metaphysical body, you are probably operating on a level that is about 500% greater than the physical body can operate. It's not just a blob of light. It is your physical, everything that's in your physical body is in that metaphysical body on a higher frequency, completely high frequency. So your eyesight is 360 degrees. But with the body, you've got to look out forwards. When you're out of the body, you can look at any angle. You can pull in distance and pull it right up to you. You're in a completely different world. You're in where we belong, a greater reality. And in a greater reality, time and space, linear time doesn't exist. And space as we know it is something completely different. It doesn't work that way. The moon's really not very far away. A hop, step and a jump and you're there. But we need a bit more than that physically. And so it's a completely different reality. I have lately been trying, and it really challenged me I've got a hectare here, 2.4 acres. Now I can go to other places and to many levels, and that's easy. But here I'm so familiar with it. Physically, I've almost got an emotional link with the whole place because the whole lot is a garden. I've turned the forest into a forest and it's all garden, and which I look after. And so I've got an emotional link with it. And I wanted to see, okay, if this garden is 1% of what is here, this is what quantum physics tells us, could I have a look at some of the other 99%? And I couldn't do it. I just could not find my way to doing it. Mm-hmm. And I said to Pan, how do I do this? And Pan said, well, the secret's in your heart. And I said, well, tell me. And he said, well, it wouldn't be a secret, would it? And he said, when you find that, you've got to find the secret to the secret. And I said, well, that's it. Yep, that's it. So for 6 months, I couldn't get anywhere. And then that takes me into another story. We can look at that if you like. But anyway, I found the way. And the very first time I tried it, I overcompensated and I made a big leap. Instead of stepping between, I leapt. And I cleared several realities and landed in my own garden. I found it's part of a city on another frequency, a much higher frequency. But in this city, which was beautiful, sentient city, the city was completely aware of me and very quickly communicated with me. There was nobody there. Couldn't find anybody. I thought, this is bizarre. How can you have a city? My garden was only a part of it. It wasn't huge like New York or anything, but a very nice garden city. Anyway, the pavement took me, carried me along like a Supersite, you know, people movers in the airport. Mm-hmm. It did it better, but it was that sort of thing. And it took me into a building. And as I went into the building, there was a tremendous light shining down. And suddenly there were people there everywhere. And then they told me I was out of phase. And I said, yeah, I couldn't see anybody. They could see me, but they couldn't understand what I was not seeing. And so once I was in phase, they quickly twigged it. So there are people like us, a long way ahead of us. But even they said, you know, what I've done, even by their standards, was pretty good. So I apparently cleared two levels of frequencies and to reach them, which I didn't intend to do. But they said that none of them have achieved that, to go 2 levels higher than they are to a higher level. And so you realize you get all these levels of frequency. Everyone is populated with people. And we think we're it. And we think we're the only ones. Well, we're just the tip of the iceberg. And so I just find that when I'm doing this sort of stuff, I learn because I have such bizarre experiences that you can't normally have them. But one of the things I've realized is if you stay in your physical body all your life, I think people probably live maybe 15% of their potential. That's about it. And I include Elon Musk in that. I mean, okay, he's found a way to make a lot of money and get into space. But as a person, he hasn't developed anything beyond the Midas touch, which he clearly has. Mm-hmm. And so I probably find now, you see, this is the paradox. we have what you call a word individuality. And if you slow it down, you have in divided duality. And that's how we live, in divided duality. And the duality is the physical and the metaphysical. And so what happens if you take the divide away so that physical and metaphysical become one? Well, the divide is there because most people live their lives, I'll be generous, with a 99% focus on their physical body, on their physical life, which they're not even a physical body. It's like a vehicle. It's like getting in a car one day and then you decide, I'm a car, and you never get out again. And people say he's nuts. He thinks he's a car. Well, I look around and I think they're nuts. They think they're bodies. But anyway, and so 99% focus on being a body, maybe 1% toward the spiritual. But then on the other side of the divide, there's a metaphysical, immortal, eternal self. The physical, of course, is very mortal and doesn't really last all that long. And then on the other side is the immortal, eternal self, and it probably gets way less than 1% focus. And so it doesn't develop. There's no focus. Where you focus, your energy flows and creates and connects and develops. So it doesn't get any development. So I began to give it much more focus. And so now I'm probably 60 physical, 40 metaphysical, and that's a nice blend. You could never get 50-50 because the physical world is too in your face. Well, I couldn't. Maybe some others have gone way ahead of me. But I'm 60-40, so everything to me I translate into terms of metaphysical, including this whole episode we're going through, the pandemic of fear, really looking at what's going on a different level. I think the greatest shock to me is the amount of fear in humanity. Here we are, an immortal, eternal species, and terrified. Mm-hmm. And you then begin to see the vastness of the human ignorance. I'm talking about humanity as a whole, not every person. And so imagination is dismissed. It's just not real. Oh, you imagined it, therefore it's not real. It's dismissed. Probably the greatest creative power available to us on this planet, and it's dismissed. And yet, sports psychologists know of it. They know exactly how powerful it is. And they teach, like a golfer, if he does 70% physical practice and 30% imagination, where every shot is perfect, he won't be as good a player who can do 70% in his imagination and getting it perfect every time, and only 30% to put it into reality. Mm-hmm. Because that takes far, far more concentration, far more focus to do it in your imagination. And, when I was a boy, the newspapers had long columns. Now they're like this long. You mustn't take too much because we'll lose their concentration. Right. I happen to know that television caters for the concentration of a 12-year-old. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when we talk of dumbing down, oh my God, America's good at it. Japan, you should watch their daytime TV. You'd think you're on another planet. It's so stupid. And ours is no better.
Sure. Like I don't watch TV anymore, really. I mean, I'll watch, like, I don't know. We were expecting a winter storm here this weekend. I'll watch the weather, but that's about it. But I mean, again, it's like, it seems like they're just trying to drive fear into people, with the weather and the snow and the, everything. So going back to your points of imagination and like the golfer, the sports psychologist idea, I think that there's so many different studies about visualization. I mean, you can visualize yourself doing push-ups and you'll physically start developing muscles. The placebo effect, you take sugar pills and you imagine it, you think you're taking Tylenol and your headache will cure itself, right? Like there have been studies where cancer patients, there was a study where cancer patients in 1983, I can't remember the name of it. I'll just say that it's there. If you want to Google it, that's fine. But in 1983, there was a study with cancer patients and they were taking sugar pills and they thought it was, treatment for that, right? Like it was chemo. And like half of the patients were losing their hair, and it was not chemo at all. So, I mean, the power of thought, the power of imagination is 100%, there is evidence of that. I
And
guess.
yet, and everybody knows it, and yet they still don't get it right.
Sure. Like you said, we're fear-based, right? Like we are we're fearful of death, and we're fearful to actually live our lives.
Yes, exactly right. We're fearful of life, and fear is, we have to create it to have it. I mean, God didn't make it and say, okay, everybody's got 100% of fear. Your life is to get rid of it. It's like we have to create it to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't create it anymore. It doesn't mean I never get the opportunity. I choose love instead. But most people, the subconscious program doesn't give them a choice, because the strongest element in the subconscious program, and when you consider Bruce Lipton says that 94% of humanity is subconscious, probably most of the time, and then the biggest element of that is fear. Now you see the evidence of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fear, like not having enough, not doing enough, not fear of death. Ultimately, that's what that's what fear is derived from, fear of death. I mean, why do people? I mean, I think you even discussed this in one of your books. Like when you were milking the cows, you were kind of asking yourself, "Why am I doing this?" And you ultimately had the answer of fear, because fear was driving you to do these things.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's when I decided I'm going to stop.
Well, and then there's the unknown, right? Like the fear of the unknown of what I will do.
That's the greatest. That's the greatest. Death is the unknown. And so fear of the unknown. I mean, a lot of people are fine by day and it gets dark and they don't go out.
Sure.
And a lot of people walk around the streets all lit up. But if you pointed across the wood, through the woods, as soon as they, oh God, no, there might be somebody in there waiting for me. I mean, if you're walking through, shall we say, Berlin, in one of the areas that are not advised to not walk at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you hear footsteps behind you, does anybody think, oh God, that's my guardian angel wearing combat boots? No, they don't think that. They immediately think there's somebody there to do them harm, because most people use imagination to the negative. And most people are talking to themselves 200 to 300 words a minute all day and every day, same conversation, and it's all to do with our inadequacy, can't do this, fear, not good enough, criticizing, judging, something like 80% of it. It's incredible, and we still do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, all right, so we are programmed, we are indoctrinated, from our, from a child up to adulthood, and we get into, this materialistic lifestyle where we have to have more, we have to do more, we have to have these jobs, and sometimes we take jobs just for the money so we can afford more things, and then we end up not happy in those jobs. And then it's like, all right, you start, I think the evolution of consciousness is, creating curiosity for itself, asking questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What am I truly? And you start asking yourself these questions. You start researching different types of books, or you might get brave enough to pick up something that questions your beliefs, and you start stumbling upon like breadcrumbs from the larger consciousness system, and you start looking at your life and you're like, there's more to this, right? You start doing experiments with your meditations, and you start being able to manifest things in your reality that you never thought. You start realizing your reality is not what you thought. And now you're stuck, right? Like you're in this job, you want to quit, but then again, it's like, do you really want to quit? Will that make your life more, I guess, comfortable? Maybe not. But here's the thing, right? Like I feel like you have to start on yourself, right? Like that's the key to freedom, is like being able to be in a position where these things don't bother you and allow it to roll off you, or like just kind of see it for what it is. Like you've talked about it where, you step in front of a tidal wave or whatever, and if you're pure love, you'll go right through that tidal wave, right? Like if you're standing in, how do you become pure love in everyday life and allow yourself to not be bothered by the noise, be bothered by the simulation, be bothered by the play, you know what I mean? The drama.
That's a journey. It's a journey. When I was 35, the question hit me, who am I? And I was so aware it didn't come out of the intellect. It didn't come out of the head. It seemed to hit me in the gut. And it changed my life because I wanted to know. It was 15 years later before I got to a place of spiritual enlightenment. And so it's a journey, but it's a journey it's a journey for the rest of your life. There's no place where I'm there. You know, I wrote a book, a novel, Getting There, but there is no place called there. You're just getting all the time. But it gets easier. And as wisdom grows and as you begin to, for instance, I noticed in me that as I realized that there is nothing outside self. Now, that's a pretty controversial statement because immediately everybody think of themselves as physical. And so, of course, I'm talking about self as a field of energy. And then there's no boundaries or borders to that field of energy. And you realize that you are the world. And if you are the world, then you are the universe. Now, that's a beautiful concept, but experiencing that reality is something else again. There's a lovely little story about George Washington Carver, should be one of your very famous Americans. And he was the son, I shouldn't say the word, but I'll say it, but he was the son of a Negro, as they were called then, a Negro slave. And he was a genius, absolute genius. And as he grew up, he became a scientist, and he's the one who took the peanut and turned it into oil and so many different things and actually introduced it into the human diet, which wasn't a favor because I think the peanut is poisonous to the human because its pH is way too low. pH of the peanut and cancer is almost the same. But anyway, we won't get caught up in that. But George Washington Carver was an amazing man. And one day when he was elderly and retired, his students considered it an honor to go to his home and look after him. Like they rostered themselves and they would just make sure that he had some care and attention. And one day he was sitting on his lawn in a chair and the student on roster said to him, he noticed that he was staring at a flower and he just stared at this flower. And all the afternoon, the student couldn't understand it. Like, this is just a flower, for God's sake. Anyway, about 4:30, the student says to him, sir, he said, it's getting cooler. I think perhaps you should come in. And George Washington Carver just nods and continues staring at the flower. Half an hour later, the student says, sir, I must insist you come in. I have to make sure you're well. And it's getting cool out here now. And then he said, sir, you've been sitting all the afternoon staring at a flower. I don't understand. And George Washington Carver looked up at him and smiled. And he said, well, he said, son, you see a flower. I see the universe. Now, you can't teach that. You can't teach it. Most people see a flower and it's the same flower that the plant had last year and the year before. They see the same flower because their program is sameness. And so you have to learn to realize that this flower each year is completely new. And then if there's newness in you, the newness in you connects with the newness of the flower. But the oldness in you can't connect with the newness of the flower. And so, you know, it's an interest. I had to learn. It took me 5 years to learn to listen. And if you're thinking, you can't listen. So we're all very good at hearing, or we're deaf, but we're all very good at hearing. But hearing isn't listening. If a dog started barking now, we'd both hear it, but we're not listening to it, but we'd hear it. And so hearing is what we've now substituted for listening. Listening, you cannot listen and think. But you can hear and think, but you can't listen and think. Because listening means you're in the moment with the sound or the voice or the music. Whereas if you start to think, you're immediately in the past or the future, because you can only think your way out of the moment. You can't think your way into the moment. So that's something to think about when you're not thinking. And so people don't do that. I've spent 5 years learning to do that. Not all day, every day, but 10 minutes one day, an hour another day, an hour and a half another day, just over a 5-year period. Then I had to learn to see, because we don't see. We see through second-hand eyes. We see through the eyes of our beliefs, the eyes of our education, the eyes of our knowledge. We see through yesterday's eyes, last week's eyes, last year's eyes. We see through everything, but nature sees through the eyes of immediacy, the eyes of the moment. We don't know how to do that. A child sits on the lawn, everything's incredible, new. You know, it's about 18 months old, doesn't know the name of anything. Everything is mystery. That's grass, Johnny, green grass. Okay, we just took away a bit and we put the first brick in the wall, which he'll then do for himself for the rest of his life, probably. And so we take away the mystery. That doesn't make us wrong, but the child really is never going to find that place that it had. You know, a 3-year-old walks into a forest and it's in the moment and it's surrounded by mystery. A 30-year-old walked in the forest, knows the names of the trees, the birds, pretty much knows it all, ho-hum. They're looking through the eyes of the intellect. Oh, yes, that's a Moreton Bay fig over there. Very nice. They live to be about 150, 200, and away they go. And they're not in the forest at all. They're in their thoughts, in their knowledge, in their library, in the head. And so when you then apply that to life, as George Washington Carver did, then you realize that this metaphysical being we are, we don't spend any time in our vastness. We spend all the time in our illusion. We belong metaphysically in a greater reality, but we spend all the time in the illusion that we create in the mind. And then we even believe we each have our own mind. I don't know where we keep that, whether it's in our head or in our toes. I'm not sure where politicians have it. I'm not sure they ever really connect it. But there's only one universal mind, and we all use it. And that mind, that universal mind is seriously contaminated. Now it gets interesting. If you go in on the resonance of the human thinking, you go straight into that contamination. But if your resonance, if your frequency is much higher, then you go into mind on a higher frequency and you find a higher frequency of mind.
So
now I don't do science, and so I don't find any of this through science. I find it through metaphysics and meta-science, but I do all that my way.
Well, when you're doing that metaphysically, are you receiving information? Like when I am meditating and when I am using my imagination, like I will get to this point where, like Tom Campbell calls it 0-point consciousness, where I am, you know, and I use hemisync or, you know, binaural beats to help me get to this state, where I'm floating in the void and I can use my imagination and I start, you know, having interactions with, you know, it could be beings or it can be loved ones, past loved ones, whatever. And I can receive, or I am having a conversation and then some information comes to me that I don't necessarily know about, right? Like things that I have to fact check. Are you getting the same type of information from different types of beings when you travel metaphysically?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all telepathic when you're in the metaphysical body, because you don't really have a voice. Your physical lungs and larynx are not with you. And so it's all telepathic. And I mean, really, once you can communicate you can communicate with everything. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. There's nothing that isn't. And all energy is information. You can't have energy without information. It is information. So information is energy. Energy is information. And that information, energy, is communicating the whole time, but nobody listens. Now, for instance, if there's a tsunami coming, everything in nature knows, and all the animals move out the area and the birds fly away. It's just us humans, which are the clever ones, and don't have a clue until they see it up in the air over the top of their heads. And so we're not listening. We just don't listen. But if we were to listen, the energy of the tsunami would be communicating very powerfully. But nobody's listening. Everybody's talking to themselves in their head. And so we've sort of dropped out of life. We're like an illusion playing along, not going anywhere. In fact, I could definitely say over the last few thousand years, the evolution of the human consciousness has slowed right down en masse. Not talking about individuals. There are millions who are evolving beautifully, but en masse, it's come to a stagnation. We've hit stagnation point. And it's interesting because everybody wants to be comfortable, and comfort is the path to stagnation. Discomfort is a path towards growth, in fact. And so the third world that we look down on are very uncomfortable. And you will probably find more spiritual growth there than in the Western world, where we then try to grow spiritually with our intellect. And there is no intellectual path.
Yeah. I mean, their quality of life is a lot better, right? Like they live in this communal type of lifestyle where they're taking care of one another. And, I just feel like we've got, like, I like this nuclear family types of houses, right? Like we've separated ourselves. We went from the community. Now we're separating ourselves from that. Now we're separating ourselves from our family, and now we're separating ourselves from each other. And it's like, I don't know. I think
and now in this time, the great divide is there is an apartness taking place, and those who are locked in the old will do this cycle, a similar cycle again, and those who are moving toward the new will move into where they move away from that old thought pattern. They'll disengage from it and move into the new. I was reading recently about some natives in I think it's South American village, and a child is born, and every lactating mother, they just pick up the child and feed it, and the child wanders around. It's in this little village, it had about 30 mothers, and every person just picks it up and cuddles it, and it's just loved. It's just loved. And I thought, my God, what happened to us? Like a village was supposed to once. The idea of a village was that we could do that. Now villages, they just compete with each other, and you don't talk to your neighbor.
Sure.
It's like we've lost the plot, but where we lost it, we lost ourselves. We lost touch with who we are. And all we do, we have the same thoughts we've had for probably 1,000, 10,000 incarnations, different language, different words, different lots of things, but the same emotional trauma, the same crisis, the same stress, the same worry, different words, but it's all the same energy. And we're not doing well with it. And so to me, COVID has shown me, my God, we're sick. What a sick humanity we are. And the elderly, I mean, I'm supposed to be elderly. The elderly are the sickest of all. And in a way, have they spent their life considering their health, realizing this is my body, this is my vehicle? They take their car in to be serviced regularly, but they never gave a thought to the vehicle that they have, to look after it, to feed it what it needs, to give it drink what it needs, to fine tune it, to really honor it as a temple of the soul. They just didn't do that. And I'm compassionate for them, but hey, they're immortal. They'll come back and do it again, and they'll either do it better or not. There's no end to this. It just keeps going. Sure. But I'm happy to move out of this frame into a new one.
Well, I'm trying to graduate kindergarten. Whatever level this is, I'm trying to graduate so I can go to first grade. But
don't try,
allow myself to graduate. Well, I mean, with evolution comes that that expansion, it's expansion of awareness, expansion of curiosity, expansion of finding oneself. I mean,
But Trey, you have already started. It's like you've primed the engine and you pointed in a direction. Just trust it now. Don't try. Let go of try, and just allow it to happen, because it's not going to slow down and stop. Mm-hmm. And when you allow, it comes into you in a much more organic way. When you try, you get an idea, okay, this will work for me. And somewhere along the line, you're on an intellectual path, and the mind says, okay, another one playing my game of try. And with your name of Trey, you don't need to try, Trey. You can just you can just allow. And
That's
it'll
what I'm
work.
finding. That's what I'm finding out, right? Like it's the intellectual part of myself, the white knuckle it kind of thing, right? But the more I'm letting go of the rope, as you say, right? Like just allowing, opening myself up, allowing experiences and collecting my own data, and experiencing the larger consciousness, experiencing my consciousness, and allowing transformation.
It'll happen. It'll happen. You've already set your direction. You've already set the focus. You just allow it. You don't have to tell a flower how to unfold the bud. It knows. All it needs is sun and water. And so that means you nourish yourself by loving yourself. That is the fastest track there is, just loving yourself. And anytime a criticism comes along for you about you, you should say, no, sorry, done that, I'm perfect. Everybody, today we have a society, nobody's perfect. That's the thing, nobody's perfect. That means everybody's wrong, because I start from the premise, if we're creations of supreme creation, a divine creation, a God, whatever you like to call it, if it created in its own image, which it did, then it would be the image of perfection. And so I would suggest you start with the idea, I'm already perfect. All I've got to do now is allow my perfection to express. And because I'm perfect, I will thank myself each day for my delightful perfection. I will enjoy my company every day. I'll fill myself with thoughts of appreciation and feelings of appreciation for me. I don't know what city you live in, but every time I walk outside, I'll say, wow, this city is so blessed because I'm here. Gradually go from laughing at the thought to realizing, hey, it's true. And we're blessed that everybody's here. And all they've got to do is realize that they are God. They are, if they're a part of God, they're the whole of God in the part. If everybody did that, we would lift into another dimension. We'd go straight into the sixth dimension.
What's that like?
It's a lot nicer than this. I mean, this is great, but you have to, this is a pretty heavy resonance. It's a pretty heavy resonance. And right now, to me, there's a battle going on because all this chaos is actually love-driven. It's not fear-driven. And so there's a battle between the cabal creating fear through all the media outlets to push down the love, and love will not be denied because it's the greatest power there is. And the love is creating more and more chaos to give everybody a chance to go to their own place in consciousness. And so we all move on. Some of us will inherit the earth, some of us won't, but it doesn't matter. Nobody dies. Nobody dies. I mean, somebody said to me, you either have the vaccination or euthanasia. I say, give me the euthanasia. I'm moving on. That's fine, because I'll do it on my terms, not with a body shot full of toxins, which actually affect us metaphysically. But that's another story, and I doubt you want to go there.
Well, I think this self-love topic is something that is resonating with me, especially lately, just because we get so busy with things, with life and
It's a lovely topic, self-love.
yeah, self-love, right? Like we, to do what you just said, right? To love ourselves and to know that we are perfect, and to know that we are part of that the original piece of consciousness, right? Like that original piece we are a part of. But we don't cut ourselves enough slack. We don't, we typically are our worst enemies, and we, it shows in our self-talk. It shows in our, just look at the pharmaceutical companies, right? Like how much, billions and billions of dollars they make just with supplying people with prescriptions for feeling better about themselves.
What sort of, what species of intelligence puts its life and health in the hands of those who benefit from its sickness? I mean, tell me, what species is that stupid other than us humans? I mean, who would be so crazy? For our health, our good health, we put ourselves in the hands are those who profit from our sickness. I mean, I rest my case. It's just, that's, there is you see, to have intelligence, you've got to be conscious. Intelligence doesn't stand alone. It's conscious intelligence, subconscious intellect. And intelligence belongs in the moment. Intellect you can think about, but only intelligence belongs in the moment. Nobody's ever in the moment. So there's not much of it being used.
Sure. Well, I mean, again, right? Like, we are just so quick to get rid of our own experience of, whatever that subjective experience is. Like, we want to look at everyone else's viewpoint on any type of different subject and say, all right, well, they're right. Like, even with imagination, it's like, I had this great travel today, like, or I had this great meditation because I went to the beach and I relaxed and I was there. And then somebody comes up to you and says, no, you weren't there. That was your imagination. Like, but you take his word for it because, oh, well, I'm dumb, or I don't know what I'm talking about. He must be right. Like, every decision that we make through life is subjective a lot of the time, unless you're taking an exam at school. Then obviously you're studying and you have to use objective mindset to pass that test. But I mean, everything from your family to your emotional needs to whatever, your well-being is very subjective. And so, like, I think it's time for us to take our meditations more seriously, our intuition more seriously, stop writing it off as, not real, because, when you go to sleep at night, you start dreaming and this body falls away and you think that you're there and you feel like you don't even think about the body really. You're just in that dream. You're in that moment. That's just another part of you and another piece of awareness, consciousness, right? Like, and then you wake up and you're like, oh man, that wasn't real. This is real. So it's like, just enjoy your subjective experience. And that's what I am doing. I am just really taking a hard look at my subjective experience and not judging it, but just enjoying it. And I'm allowing it. Like we just talked about, I'm allowing the larger consciousness to help me.
You've got to remember that school and Western religion is all a design to separate a person from their greatness. I mean, your spirituality is your connection with the divine. So the church took all that away. You have to have an intermediary. And all the churches, they took that away. They had talked to God. You're not allowed to do that. And in fact, you're simply, if you're talking with yourself, you're talking with God, but it depends on your consciousness. You could be talking with your own madness, and that's happening a lot. But imagination is our conscious intelligence, imagination. We have all the tools, and we've been trained away from them. I mean, the whole education system, why are we left brain dominant? Do you think that's an accident? Of course it's not an accident. It was absolutely orchestrated. I mean, we're naturally whole brain. That means you can move your left brain, right brain, you can use them, interact backwards and forwards with them and come from a holistic viewpoint. And so that was taken away. So thousands and thousands of years ago, the educational system was gradually created to cater for the left brain of the left brain. And so we gradually became more and more left brain dominant, and we gradually got more and more sucked in by the intellect. Now, fear has no relationship with the right brain whatsoever. So the left brain has no relationship with love. It doesn't know what love is. It can't experience it. It's not designed for that. So the left brain is about fear, revenge, survival, anger, and hurt. It's good at that, and it's good with all the intellect, and we need it. It's brilliant at all that. But that is where the media are now. So in other words, if you're left brain dominant, you can be controlled. You can be controlled. You can be frightened. You can be herded. And when we say control, it's like this is why the cabal came up with sheeple. They've only got to put the dogs round them and they can move them wherever they want. And that's why they came up with the term sheeple. Like sheep, you can be driven to any direction you want because they're left brain dominant, because they have fear and they want revenge, and they're full of want. want is the name of poverty. And so right brain has a completely relationship with love and with compassion and with the holistic world. It doesn't even see us as physical. It sees us as much more fluid and open than we see ourselves. So it has a completely different relationship. Now, if we were right brain dominant, all of us, you can't control them. You can't control them because they don't have fear. They can start off with fear, but as they grow more to their right brain dominance, they won't have fear. And if they're whole brain, then they won't have fear because they begin to realize they're far greater than this physical body allows. And so the whole thing was done. Equally, one of the things Greg Braden has lately discovered, the writing of the DNA. And I think what he's offered to the humanity is beautiful, beautiful indeed. But what I discovered recently was, in fact, I discovered it because I realized that Pan was saying, the secret's in your heart, and I wanted to find the way to do this thing. And so I could only allow. There's no direction I knew to go. And one day, because I'm doing a lot of online work, especially this year, like every evening nearly I'm online. And one day when I was online with Germany, a woman, Elizabeth, said to me, "Have you ever heard the fifth chamber of the heart?" And I said, "No." And she said, and then she sent me a whole heap of, just not a big amount of much, but what Google or Wikipedia or something says, I don't know. Anyway, she sent me some literature, and there wasn't much, but I read it, and apparently, have you heard about this?
Mm-mm. Okay,
well, apparently the fifth chamber of the heart is also known as there we go, forgotten the word immediately. God, would you believe it? I can forget the word just as I was going to say it. It's a node. It's an area. It's tiny. It's about 4 millimeters. Mm. The temperature of the body for us is about 35 degrees Celsius. It'll come to me while I talk. And the temperature in this little tiny chamber, which is minute, is 100 degrees Celsius. It's also a vacuum. And when they put a camera in that can photograph in cells, right down to a cellular level, they found literally like a picture of an androgynous human being standing in it, which was sort of like the size of a cell. And they named it the God atom. And so when I discovered this, I decided I wanted to travel into this place. And so what I found is metaphysically, it is vast. When I went into it, there's this vast, vast chamber. And then I found that if I brought the sun out of the 12th chakra, if I took that and then brought out from my brow chakra, brought out the third eye, which is the pineal, and brought them into the fifth chamber, I suddenly realized in a moment of intuition, this is the Holy Trinity. The sun in our 12th chakra, the third eye in this fifth chamber. This is the Holy Trinity, which was taken away from us long, long ago, thousands of years ago. And Christianity took it. You had to go through a service to get to this. And then I began to find the power of this, the incredible power of it. And now I'm sort of got groups around the world who are doing healing from this very place. And it becomes immensely powerful. And it's God, that word still snuck away from me. And so you make these discoveries. And that's when I found this is the way into this other reality that I wanted to go in. It's the gateway to the universe. And I was telling Pan that I'd found this. And I said, they call it the God atom. And he said to me, I would look on it as the seed to ascension. And boy, did that ring with me. The seed to ascension. And that's how I look at it now. And there's a good place for you to go. That's the place. Now,
Well,
I do this, I'd be doing this the first Sunday in February, which could even well be next Sunday. And I do this at 5 p.m. my time. And there's several thousand people around the world do it. So I will be taking them through the process, through the chakras, and eventually we'll end up in the 5th chamber. And then I'm going to take them on a journey. Mm-hmm. And this journey will be a little bit challenging for a lot of people. Mm. But so if you want to join it, you will know how to go to that place. And if you go to that place for your meditation, in fact, when you get there, I don't even meditate. Now, I'm not against meditation, I'm all for it, but I don't actually meditate. Mm-hmm. My energy and meditation, I spent 20 years doing it in my last incarnation. And this time I'm not so into it.
Sure.
I like to me, meditation, I wake up in the morning, I look in the mirror, God, I'm still perfect, and I'm going to remain that way. That's my meditation. And that goes with me all day. That stays with me until the next morning when I do it again.
Well, I'll tell you what, we got to do this again. We're running up on time, but Michael, this is always fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time. How can people reach out to you? Is there a website?
Yes, michaelrhodes.com and Michael Rhodes Community Online.
Michael Rhodes, thank you so much for taking the time, sir. We got to do this again.
My pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoy this.